most famously, obviously, Theresa May's efforts to solve the social care problem, really dented her electoral prospects. So he's going to be hoping that Louise Casey's review, which is ongoing, comes up with some new ideas about funding and supporting a big social care reform program. All his fingers will be crossed about that. And then we'll have to see whether he's able to get a social care program together this side of the election, or whether it's one of the things he goes into the election asking for a mandate for.
Now the flurry of the first few days are out of the way, what happens next? Professor Marc Stears is director of the Policy Lab at University College London, a former speechwriter for Ed Miliband, and he knows Andy Burnham reasonably well. Hello there, Professor Stears.
Good morning, nice to be here.
Exactly how well do you know Andy Burnham?
Oh, look, Andy Burnham's been in Labour politics for, a long period of time, first of all in the cabinet and then obviously as mayor of Manchester, and all of us who've been involved in think tanks and policy advising have come across Andy over the years.
Well, I met him once and I did find him very personable, unlike Keir Starmer, who, when I did interview him, found him very awkward. It was a very awkward experience for both of us. So he's got a personal touch, and I think that's what people like about him. But we're getting a lot of vibes, aren't we, from Andy Burnham? But he's got some really, really difficult policy choices to make, none of which appear to have been properly costed yet. So could I get your review of his first week in the top job?
I mean, I think everyone in Number 10 will be delighted with how the first week has gone, for two reasons, I think. The first one is that the challenge that Andy Burnham has faced really is a public that's just sort of had enough of politics, lost trust in politics, doesn't think politicians have their interests at heart. And so he's been out there trying to say that he understands what life is like, understands the importance of the cost of living, is on your side. And so that's the first reason they'll be happy. The second reason is, they've changed leader, midstream, new prime minister, without a civil war in the Labour Party. Obviously, some people are disappointed they didn't get jobs in the reshuffle, etc. But mostly the party has pulled together, and unity in these kind of circumstances is obviously a very high premium.
What about these unfunded policy announcements? Because we're going to get onto social care in a moment, which is going to cost an absolute fortune. But at least everyone is I suppose, willing him to do well on that across all the parties, because no one's managed to deal with that properly at any stage over the last 20 years. But these the bus fare cuts, the 5% cut on domestic electricity, the obvious expenditure that's going to come from ending rough sleeping. There's a few sort of things that are going to be cancelled, which have been chucked out there to pay for it, but we haven't seen any sums yet, have we?
Yeah, I mean, most of these are what we call switch spends. So they've tried to find money that's somewhere else in the, in the government coffers and switch it across. And most of them are relatively cheap in so far as government policy goes. It's an indicative first week rather than a big policy first week. So it's meant to be illustrating the primary, priorities of the government rather than actually making, huge, significant change. And again, I think the government will be pleased with how these policies seem to be polling at the moment. Luke Trill from the More in Common polling organisation was out yesterday saying that all of them have been received pretty well in focus groups and polling at the moment. But as you say, the big decisions, the big amounts of money, the big changes are still to come. And there's going to be an awful lot of preparation going on in Downing Street as you move towards party conference in September and then the budget after that.
Yeah, I mean, he's indicated that revolutionising social care is his priority. He is going to be prepared to spend political capital on it. He's got 3 years left of this administration to set it up, get it running and pass the laws that needed to be passed to make it work. But it's going to be expensive. So what are the pitfalls of basically hanging your hat on this single big policy?
It's always been a passion of Andy Burnham's social care. I mean, when he was Shadow Secretary for Health, when Ed Miliband was the leader, he spent a huge amount of effort trying to get a social care programme up and running and in the manifesto for the 2015 election. And clearly it matters to him personally now because the situation his dad finds himself in with Alzheimer's. So you're absolutely right to say that he's going to put it right at the top of his list. But it has brought down many a politician in the past, most famously, obviously, Theresa May's efforts to solve the social care problem, really dented her electoral prospects. So he's going to be hoping that Louise Casey's review, which is ongoing, comes up with some new ideas about funding and supporting a big social care reform program. All his fingers will be crossed about that. And then we'll have to see whether he's able to get a social care program together this side of the election, or whether it's one of the things he goes into the election asking for a mandate for. So I think all the big decisions, again, are slightly unclear at the moment. We don't quite know where it's going to land. What we do know, though, as you say, is it's hugely controversial terrain, but hugely important for the new Prime Minister, and we can see him taking risks.
Aside from the mechanics of the delivery of whatever plan gets hammered out, paying for it is the problem. We're trying to increase the defence budget. The welfare budget, I think most people are agreed, is almost out of control. The triple lock pension, Burnham doesn't seem massively keen to try and unlock. So, and we're a massively indebted state. So how would you, if you had the top job now, how would you be looking to pay for this policy?
That's precisely why I don't have the top job. These are really, really hard decisions. The fiscal situation, everyone knows, is really constrained. Andy Burnham and John Healey have committed themselves to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules. There's very little room for manoeuvre. And obviously, as the situation in Iran seems to get worse again, then there are more threats to the budget coming down the line.
So what do you cut? Where do you go? What do you cut?
I mean, look, I think the reality is that you're going to have to find new ways of supporting social care. You won't just be able to slice and dice, in the way they've done their small policy announcements this week. But what that looks like is very much, that's Louise Casey's job to try and come up with a proposal. In the past, we know that Andy Burnham has preferred sort of inheritance tax moves, etc. Those are obviously very politically risky, very dangerous. You saw what it did to Theresa May. So I think, again, it's unknown so far. And one of the big challenges that this government faces is its time for preparation was incredibly short. I mean, the period from Andy Burnham becoming the likely Prime Minister to him becoming the actual Prime Minister is one of the shortest in history. And so they're going to have to solve these big problems whilst also running the country.
On the hoof.
That's a big challenge.
Yeah. One of the ways of potentially paying for all these new policy announcements is actually getting the economy moving again, so that we're growing, so that tax revenues actually increase. We had Andy Burnham hosting his National Economic Forum and resurrecting that. Again, what sense do you get that he is going to be focused on solving the biggest problem that we've had over the last 17 years, which is the complete lack of productivity in this country?
I mean, I think that's what matters. Again, social care is one big priority for the government. I think, productivity, regional growth, or what Andy Burnham calls growth in every postcode, that matters enormously. And he does have, perhaps unlike Keir Starmer, he does have a personal theory of how you get economic growth. And that's grounded in his experience in Manchester. He thinks you get growth in Britain through expanding the productivity of our so-called second cities. So he'll want, investment in Leeds and Birmingham and Manchester and Sheffield. These kind of sense that Britain is underperformed economically because it's relied just on London for far too long. So you're going to get a lot of devolution. You'll get a lot of efforts to bring private investment into those second cities, lots of effort and focus on young people in those cities. So that's going to be the kind of growth theory that Andy Burnham, he has already. He's trying to deploy it. They got Downing Street North, number 10 North, up and running really quickly this week because he wants to indicate to business that he wants them to invest in those cities outside London to create jobs, to create prosperity, to create growth, and then to fund the public services on which we all rely.
Well, let's see what happens. Professor Marc Stears from University College London, thank you for your time this morning.